Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, David.
And today we are doing something a little different.
You know, on my way here, I was listening to the Suspiria soundtrack.
Oh, you were getting prepared.
This was my research.
Okay, great. Well, some people on our Patreon were like, oh, I love the podcast, but it's nice when you guys do a palate cleanser that's not just like the CIA did terrible things and then a bunch of people in a labor union got shot.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that episode with our topic, which is horror, because those are all horrifying things.
It is. But yeah, today we wanted to do something that's a little palate cleanser, and since it is October, everybody loves Halloween.
You know, my other proposal for today was, like, why don't we do the International Longshoremen's Association strike and the Boeing strike, which would, I mean, I don't think anyone's been shot, well, except for
the people who were shot.
Or fell out of an airplane.
Right.
Or fell with an airplane.
Right.
But this is, it's going to be light.
I think it's going to be light.
Fun. Though,
it's going to be a fun episode.
I will say, when we were debating on it over message or whatever, I was like, I don't want to do the whole history of, like, horror as, like, a genre going back to the ancient Greeks. And Madeline, what did you say?
I said you got to do the history of horror going back to the ancient Greeks. Because here's the thing. I feel like you want to listen to a podcast, you want to come away with a little bit of knowledge. It doesn't have to be a lot of knowledge. You just want to understand. Also, worth noting, Fork is in a real playful mood. So you might hear her a lot more than usual in the background of this episode because she's trying to play with the pit bull Georgie.
And Madeline made me do a thing when I arrived where she was like, you have to ignore Fork.
We're working on it. Fork has a lot of behavioral issues that we are slowly working through. So right now we're working on Fork's door etiquette.
Which is chaotic.
It's the wildest experience. Coming to my house with Fork is the wildest experience. We tried a different thing where every time somebody came to the door, Fork had to sit and then get a treat and then wait. And I thought that would really work, but no, she would just scream, then sit, wait, get her treat, and then scream more.
Yeah, which I like. That period of time sucked for me sucked for all your guests.
Everybody who came over, yeah.
Because you just had to sit outside for 5 minutes while this dog barked, and like you just heard Madeline going, Fork, sit, Fork, sit, Fork. And I was
she did it. She's pretty good at sit and wait.
She was not. I never heard like a cessation of barking. I just heard you give up.
No, that's not true at all. That's not how that worked at all.
Madeline's over here trying to tell me about my experience.
I'm telling you, that's not how it worked because I never would do that. Because the thing about dog training is you have to be consistent. And the reason you had to wait outside for so long is because you had to wait until Fork sat and waited. Otherwise, I would have just given up a lot sooner. So no, absolutely not. That's
well,
not.
I'm just saying. Okay, it didn't last long enough for me to notice.
Well, you were on the other side of the door.
I was
You didn't see what was happening inside. But I will say that approach was not effective because Fork went back into full chaos mode almost immediately. So now we are doing an approach where there's a leash that lives under my couch, attached to the couch, and every time somebody comes over, I tether Fork to the leash, and then we ignore her until she calms down. So hopefully that's going to be more progress. But anyway.
And she's heard her name said like 10 times now, so she's poked her head out.
Yeah, she's doing better now. She's calm, she's nice, she's happy. We're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Can't be out here spreading misinformation about my dog training techniques.
Listen,
Are you my biggest op, David?
I am the dog COINTELPRO.
You really are.
Yeah.
You're trying to sow division here. So
Georgie's a good dog.
Georgie is an okay dog.
Fork is a bad dog.
Fork is a bad dog, yes, but we love her anyway. So today we are doing an episode that's a little lighter. It is going to be about the politics of horror, and we're going to focus on horror movies because Halloween is coming up, and people love to watch horror movies.
Though I think it's important, and like this is why I was like, I don't want to do a horror going back to ancient Greek, to at least talk about some of the tropes involved.
Yes,
and
definitely.
Like horror literature and where those tropes come from, because like as we'll see, a lot of horror movies are based off of old books, and like horror itself is a genre, like it's like the well it draws from is like a lot of like folk myths.
Yes, totally. So, before we get into the meat of the episode, we got to do a little housekeeping. Just let you all know, we do have book club going on over on our Patreon. If you're not part of our Patreon, it is patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. For $3 a month, you get access to 2 bonus episodes. Right now, we're doing slightly more than 2 bonus episodes per month because we are doing book club and there's a different episode for every chapter. And the book we are reading is Everyday Life in the North Korean Revolution, 1945 to 1950 by Susie Kim. And it is a great book. So if you are reading the book, you want to read the book, hop on over to our Patreon. If you don't want to read the book, but you want to know what it's all about, our episodes are pretty easy to follow, even if you're not doing the reading alongside us.
And it's, I mean, I will say, Madeline's, like, when Madeline was selling me on the book, she did say, oh, there she goes.
Fork's really playing now.
When Madeline was selling me on the book, she was like, oh, it's also like a basic primer on sort of Marxist concepts. And I think one of the things that Kim does really, really well is integrate a lot of the sort of like post-war debates within Marxism in ways that are approachable, and like you don't get bogged down in having to be like, well, I haven't read like enough Althusser or some shit like that to understand what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, it's very accessible, I believe, and
Yeah.
she does reference some kind of heady concepts, but she always gives you the info you need, and it's easy to follow along with, and I think it's really interesting. And as she says in the book, if you haven't taken the time and you're like a leftist and you have not taken the time to learn about North Korea and position North Korea historically and materially in your framework of like your understanding of what has happened in the world, especially since World War II, you frankly have an incomplete understanding of your own politics and world history.
Yeah.
So especially if you live in the United States.
I mean, I feel like, especially, right, it has changed somewhat how I think about sort of like post-colonial third worldism as like a, like, you know, tendency and liberation in the post-war period in ways that I think, you know, and we're only on what, we just did chapter 2.
Yes.
So it's already changing some shit and how it's rearranging my mind.
Yeah, it's really, really great. So, with that out of the way, let's get into the episode. And, of course, we gotta start with a Scream reference. What's your favorite scary movie, David?
You know, shit, man, probably something lame like The Shining.
The Shining! The Shining's good.
I mean, yeah, but I first of all, I learned through reading through your notes that you, in fact, do not like slasher movies, even though you made me watch all of those fucking Rob Zombie movies.
Oh, okay. I don't think of those as slasher movies.
Those, what else? It's like a bunch of people show up at a place and then are slashed.
No, it's an homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and there are more complicated themes working around that than just a standard slasher movie. A standard slasher movie is that a slasher, a guy with a knife, shows up in a small town suburbs and just starts indiscriminately killing teenagers.
Specifically,
who have sex.
Mostly women.
Women who are having sex.
Yeah.
No, so I still stand by the Rob Zombie movies. I enjoy those movies quite a bit, and I don't think of them as slasher movies.
I can what's the gray, the one from the early 2000s?
They're all kind of from the early 2000s.
I don't know. The one, we would have been about 17.
Oh, the first one that came out. That's very Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. It's like in a like roadhouse in the desert or some shit like that. I had to like leave the theater in Santa Cruz with you and your boyfriend at the time and like just go stand outside for 20 minutes because I was like, it's not even scary. No,
one of my favorite... A slog? No, one of my favorite shots in horror movie history is in that movie.
What's the shot?
It's a half shot of a woman's face, and you see her eye darting back and forth, and the only sound is her breathing very heavily, and she's very panicked, and she's running from an assailant, and you see the assailant in the background approaching in the rest of the screen, and it's a really good shot. It really makes you feel like you're in the moment, and I quite like it. But see, the thing is, the difference between me and David is that I am what people call a fan of the genre.
I like, you know, when something's like really visually striking, I don't really, like, the genre doesn't matter to me so much. Like, I love, like, I'm going to mispronounce this, Giallo, like the Italian shit, like Mario Bava, Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, because they're very visually striking movies.
Yeah, right? I've seen some really bad Argento.
Oh, no.
Like, real bad
This is the thing. Argento made, like, 3-4 good movies. And then just spent all of his credibility. Like, he, like,
We were having a conversation about this at work the other day where we think the same thing happened with Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh, yeah. Have you seen the new thing?
No, but I want to see the new thing because everybody is telling me Megalopolis is one of the worst movies ever made, and he spent $100 million of his own money making it, and everyone's like, it's shockingly bad, it's catastrophically bad, and I'm like, I must see this terrible movie.
That's kind of your thing, though.
That's my thing. I love a bad movie, and that is why I consider myself a fan of the genre. That's why I love horror movies, because there's so much campy, bad, good horror out there, and it just delights me. Like, my favorite horror movie is Dead Alive, sometimes also called Brain Dead, which is Peter Jackson, the Lord of the Rings guy. His horror movie set in New Zealand before he was the Lord of the Rings guy. It came out in the early 90s. And it is spectacularly bizarre. We'll talk about it in more detail later. But it is one of my favorite movies of all time. And
it's kind of a parody, right? Like, it's meant to be for laughs.
So this is the thing about being a fan of the genre. At a certain point, it becomes so self-referential that they're making fun of, like, as a horror fan, you get to engage in making fun of your own culture. You're laughing at yourself. You're laughing at the things you love. And that is what I like about horror as a genre, is that it is so self-referential, that it is so humble, right?
Sometimes.
I think it's humble.
Sometimes
not the stuff
it
you're watching.
Yeah, well, I don't know, the Lucio Fulci Zombie 2 or whatever, like the unofficial sequel to Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Right, where they have the shark fighting a zombie.
Yeah.
Right, come on, that's funny.
Yeah, I mean,
it's racist as shit, that movie, but...
Okay, so, like, this is the thing, though. You get to engage in it almost like you're in on the joke, you're in on the making, and I like that. I feel like it's very audience interactive. Another thing about me is that I don't enjoy going to movie theaters unless it's the kind of movie where you're allowed to yell at the movie.
This is okay. What
horror movies? You're allowed to yell at the movie in the movie theater.
And a way of putting the difference on my side, what's the thing I like least in any kind of art experience?
Anything that you feel like is winking at you.
I do not like being winked at.
I enjoy it. I'm like, we all know what's happening here. Yeah. Let's enjoy it and have a good time. So, I think that I am definitely a fan of horror movies as a genre. Weirdly, I am not a fan of Halloween. Like I hate Halloween.
Oh, the movie Halloween? Like John Carpenter? That's a very funny movie.
The holiday. The reason why we are doing an episode about the politics of horror.
I feel like we gotta have, the Monster Mash plays our, little...
It might be illegal. We can't afford it, I don't think.
You can do the thing where you play, 5 seconds of it.
I think you're allowed up to 10 seconds before you have to pay. Yeah, that's true. But no, so I am actually not a fan of Halloween. I don't much like holidays at all. They really stress me out. But I do like that it's an opportunity for us to talk about something I love.
Yeah.
That is near and dear to my heart.
I think last year I went as Alice Cooper.
For Halloween?
Yeah.
I didn't see you.
No, I saw... it was a complicated night.
See, this is the thing about Halloween. It never quite is as fun as you're hoping it will be. You never find the best party. You never find the right thing to do.
I will say, if... I did have the horrifying experience of waiting in line for a West Hollywood gay bar.
Oh, I do remember this night. You told me about it afterwards, yeah. So, since we're going to be talking about a lot of horror movies, I want to warn everybody listening, there are a lot of spoilers coming up. There are also a lot of our personal opinions about movies. David and I have exactly the opposite taste in movies.
And everything.
And everything. So some of the things we will love or hate, odds are you will agree with one of us and not the other, and that is okay. And yeah, we will be spoiling a lot of horror movies in order to talk about the politics of them, though. So if you are particularly sensitive to spoilers and you have not watched most of the horror movies that came out from the 60s to now, you might find yourself disappointed with some of the things you hear.
I will say a surprising lack of jump scares in the episode.
I will say there are 0 jump scares unless Fork really acts up and does something none of us expect.
Well, that would be scary. Okay,
that would be a jump scare. So we're going to start with David going over kind of the history of horror before we even get to the films.
Yeah, so generally speaking, when people talk about horror as a set of genre tropes or whatever, they tend to limit it to the modern period, but they also tend to point out that there are a bunch of influences that kind of built into the genre. Right, so, and I was like, I don't want to talk about Greek tragedy, and Madeline was like, you're going to talk about Greek tragedy. And
I was like, just give a couple sentences about it, so we all have the context.
So basically, right, anyone who's familiar with Greek tragedy knows that there's like a lot of like random ass violence that happens.
It is a very violent thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite violent.
So I'm just gonna point out like two of Euripides' plays, Hecuba and Hippolytus. Hippolytus was understood to be something of the inspiration for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, because it involves a kind of like resurrection from the dead plot, especially in an earlier lost version of Euripides. And Hecuba, which is like a classic like murder, revenge, body horror, gore kind of vibe. The other one that is worth talking about, and which, like, Madeline, please forgive me, I'm going to talk about it at some length and extemporaneously because it is my favorite thing. It's the thing I have a fucking tattoo of.
Okay.
Which is Aeschylus's Agamemnon.
Okay.
Which, right, like, the basic fucking plot is Agamemnon goes to the Trojan War. His ship is bestilled in the sea. This is because of, like, a thing where Agamemnon is like, I will be taking as my concubine the daughter of this, like, local priest or whatever.
Like you do.
Come
into town, steal a woman.
Steal a woman.
Like you
ancient
do.
Greek.
Who hasn't done that?
Listen, this is, the Beach Boys or whatever had a girlfriend in every port. Agamemnon had a concubine.
Yep.
Not in every port. He took them.
Yes.
But the priest was real pissed. I think it was the priest of, oh god, who's the fucking water guy? Whatever.
Zeus? Is that the water guy?
No. It's the other one.
The underworld water
Poseidon.
guy? Poseidon.
There
that
we
is
go.
a water guy.
Yeah.
He's a water guy.
Poseidon's pissed, is like, fuck you, man. Somehow, and I can't remember quite the specifics, Agamemnon gets it into his head that the way he is going to, like, satisfy Poseidon, which is apparently is true, is to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia. Iphigenia's mom, Clytemnestra, not pleased about this.
Right.
So
he was like, I'm going to trade you my daughter for yours. I'll kill my daughter so I get to take yours.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
men are trash.
There's like a point...
My dad would never.
I'm trying to figure out what my dad would do in that situation.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like my dad would be like, how did I get myself into this crazy, zany mess?
Yeah, no. My dad wouldn't steal a woman, I don't think, to begin with.
Yeah, I think my dad would be like, you wanted to do what now?
Yeah.
But in any case, right, so the Greeks, they win the Trojan War. Agamemnon takes Hecuba's daughter, Cassandra.
He's taking everybody's daughters.
How
many daughters does he need?
His concubine.
Oh my god.
Also, Hecuba in like the Euripides play, this is why she murders everyone, is like the killing or taking as concubines of her children.
Yes, great.
But Cassandra, meanwhile, Apollo fell in love with her, but she was a Vestal virgin, and so she was like, no, Apollo, what the fuck are you doing?
Okay.
By the way, this is a trope of all horror movies, an incredibly otiose and hard-to-follow plot.
This is not a trope of horror movies.
Every horror movie is like an and then.
Okay, well, not the horror movies I'm watching.
Okay, but
the horror movies I'm watching is like, oh no, a ghost did it! And everyone's like, oh, a ghost! And they're like, yeah,
so you
it's
like
a ghost.
Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, I like the live-action version of Scooby-Doo, basically.
Okay.
It's my style of horror movie.
But the shit I like was like the most like hard-to-follow fucking plot in the world. Actually tell me the plot of Suspiria. But
actually, that's fair. That is fair. Dancing. Oh no, fell. Oh no, someone fell. Oh no, what if you fall?
They're in razor blades. There are witches.
There are witches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Apollo, because of his great love for Cassandra, is like, you can have the gift of prophecy. And then because Cassandra's like, no, Apollo, we're not gonna fuck. Apollo's like, no one will believe you, though.
Wow.
Which is a real fucked up thing.
I mean, it's a real man trope.
Yeah.
It's a real man thing to do. Every high school girl who dated a guy can probably relate.
So Cassandra, now Agamemnon's concubine, she comes back. Meanwhile, Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's wife, is like, you killed my fucking daughter, you shithead. Clytemnestra's real pissed about the, like, Iphigenia dying thing, right? And so Agamemnon, he's going home, and Clytemnestra with her, like, it's funny, I was, like, trying to find dates on stuff today, so I was on the Wikipedia page, and they refer to Aegisthus, Clytemnestra's lover, as a good time boy.
Oh!
On the Wikipedia page, which I was like, I don't know, whoever let that in there.
I kind of like it.
So they're lying in wait, and Cassandra, remember, gift of prophecy, she and Agamemnon arrive home, Agamemnon's home, and Clytemnestra's like, oh shit's about to go down, and everyone's like, what are you talking about, Cassandra? And she's like, we're about to die, I'm prophesying we're about to die, holy fuck, we're about to die, and then the chorus jumps in and is like, what? No, I can't understand what you're saying. And there's, like, an extraordinarily beautiful line that is o-to-to-to-toi popoi da, which is basically gibberish in Greek.
Okay.
But remember that Cassandra might not have been, like, a native Greek speaker. She's from Troy.
Okay.
And so she's doing this gibberish thing, and then they die.
And
then they're murdered. It's very bloody, and it's a whole thing.
Right.
And so, like, you can see, like, some of the tropes of horror being formed. Like,
Yeah.
the revenge story, the, like, you know, like, the sort of, like, cosmic things controlling your fate, shit like that. Through the Middle Ages, you get sort of Vlad III, the Impaler in the 15th century. This is Dracula. Right, so this is, like, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and, like, one of the first bestsellers in print in Germany was an account of all the shit Vlad did, like, all the people he killed.
Right.
Right, so you get that as, like, the kind of, like, basis for Dracula, and you get Elizabeth of Bathory, who, you know, notoriously seemed, like, in, like, myth or in, like, popular folklore of the time, in the 16th century, was said to have lured hundreds of girls and women to their death.
Wow.
And so you get this kind of, like...
We're building, like... Yeah, it's mythology. We're building folk stories.
Right,
folk
this
tales.
is, like, the, like, store of stories that horror gets drawn from. It's realistically a fundamentally modern genre. And so the first kind of, like, modern version is Walpole's Castle of Otranto, and I cannot... Okay, the plot is basically, like, a guy is trying to protect his, like, lineage, and his name is Manfred, and he tries to marry his sickly son to, like, the hot girl next door. I had to read this for a fucking class in undergrad.
I made a color wheel in undergrad. With gouache.
I once was in a program where I did interpretive dance about Finnegan's Wake.
I would rather die.
It was not my favorite thing that I've ever done.
No, I would not enjoy that at all. The gouache was nice, though. That was fun.
The dance was bad.
I would pay money to see a recording of you doing that.
So, Manfred's like... So, right before the wedding happens, a giant helmet falls on Manfred's son and kills him.
A helmet?
Yes. Like a, like, house-sized helmet.
Okay.
And then, in the sort of melee that follows this thing happening, like, a servant from nearby, or, like, a peasant named Theodore comes and, like, takes Isabella, the girl, away. And then Manfred is like, I will actually marry Isabel because my son is, like, a sickly idiot and I hate my wife.
Okay.
Because she gave me a sickly son.
Right.
And then... Much to do happens. Eventually, Manfred kills his daughter in a church, and then a ghost appears and is like, the prophecy of your doom is fulfilled. It doesn't make a lot of fucking sense. I will say, on the first printing, it was published anonymously, which makes sense to me, because it is trash.
Got it.
But then it became wildly popular, like many trash things.
I was going to say, this has sounded pretty good to me. By the time the ghost showed up, I was like, I'm in. Yeah. I'm in. Let's go.
The other one...
Giant helmet, though. I have some questions.
Apparently, it's like a stat... Like, is
it a symbol? Does this mean something different? Was this a translation issue?
No, it's in English.
It is a giant literal helmet.
That is from a statue outside the church where the wedding is supposed to happen. but then is like magically made bigger to like kill.
To kill. Got it. Right. It's not a deal breaker for me, if I'm being honest. The giant helmet, while perplexing, is not a deal breaker.
So this is like the birth of Gothic horror, and this is in 1764. And like Gothic horror, it's like in English novels are still pretty fucking new at this point, right? Like they're not even a century old.
When was the printing press even? Johannes Gutenberg.
This was the 16th century.
Yeah, so we've only had a couple hundred years of making books. It's pretty new.
And there's like a lot to say about the English novel here, because one of the things that will be important for horror as a genre is the audience for the English novel was mostly women.
This makes sense.
Right, like, and so, like, a lot of the English novel revolved around these, like, extraordinarily salacious stories about, like, women's lives. Mm-hmm. Somewhat famously, there's Samuel Richardson's Pamela, which is about a guy, it's, like, Samuel Richardson's 500-page rape fantasy.
Oh, God. That sounds like modern-day horror for sure.
But it's, like, told from the point of view of the woman. And, like, you know, but, like, that's sort of, like, a lot of...
if we didn't trigger warn it yet, there's going to be a lot of talk of sexual assault in this episode.
And, obviously, murder and blood.
Yeah.
But, like, the, like, rape stuff is, like, it's all over this.
It's all over the place.
So the other one worth mentioning is William Beckford's Vathek, 1786. Originally, William Beckford, if the name hasn't clued you in, English guy, wrote it in French. He was, like, a confessed and, like, open Orientalist. It was just, like, obsessed with, like, the Near East, like, the Middle East kind of shit.
We got some of those today, too.
That's
English guys, white guys, American guys.
That's all gonna be all over it. And he pitches it, again, it's published anonymously. He pitches it as the 1002nd Arabian Night. And,
okay.
So he was like, y'all have just read 1001 Arabian Nights. It was just published in English.
Very popular.
Hell yeah.
Everyone loves it. I'm gonna ride that popularity.
We're gonna do the sequel.
Yeah. Unauthorized sequel.
I can't even begin to describe the plot. I will also say, from a personal note, I did a project about this book in undergrad, and the night before I was supposed to give my, like, presentation on it, I fell asleep in my contacts and got a corneal abrasion and started bleeding from my eyes while it was happening.
Wow, that's so cool.
My professor at the time said, I think you're taking Gothic horror a little too seriously.
Yeah, I can see that. That's pretty amazing. I also got a corneal abrasion in college. I sliced my cornea open with a wire hanger that fell from my closet, and then I had to wear an eye patch for 2 weeks. But I worked as a graphic designer, like an imagery toucher, and because of that, I was not able to do my job because my depth perception was so bad, I couldn't operate the mouse and the computer right, and then I was out of work for 2 weeks. While my eye healed.
Sucks. Plot, as best as I can recall it, is Vathek. He's some sort of, like, royal guy in, like Samara or whatever. Some, like, you know, whatever Middle East kind of thing. And he's like a deranged Faust who's like, I want all the secret knowledge and witchcraft stuff. Right, so Vathek's like, I want all the secret knowledge, and this guy who's like a infidel shows up and is like, I have all the secret knowledge. And at first Vathek is like, tell me the secret knowledge, and the guy's like, no.
It's secret. That makes sense.
I'll sell it to you.
Oh, not so secret. Okay.
And Vathek's like, I'm just going to imprison you, and then the infidel is like, absolutely fucking not. I'm just going to murder your guards, and because I'm like a secret knowledge sorcerer guy. Eventually they come to a deal, which is like, sacrifice a fifth of the children of Samara to me.
Seems a little harsh. I'm not gonna lie. That seems a little intense as far as punishment goes.
There's a really fabulous scene where the infidel is like in a vortex, just shouting more as Vathek tosses children into the vortex.
Wow.
And the infidel like gobbles them up, and
he's eating them.
Yeah, he's like sucking their blood and eating them. And it's very horror, right?
Okay, yeah, right. Eating children, I think, is the most horror you could get, maybe.
And I think, right, and like obviously, like these are like very standard horror tropes, but also like extraordinarily like Orientalist type tropes.
Right.
Like obviously we have to talk about Frankenstein.
Yeah,
Prometheus Unbound, published 1818. Also, Mary Shelley, Mary Wollstonecraft's daughter.
Teenage girl.
Yeah.
She was very young.
She was very young, having, let's call it, a not ideal relationship with Percy Shelley.
Okay.
It was very abusive.
Who's Percy Shelley?
The poet.
But it was Mary Shelley's dad? Or
No, her dad, I can't remember her dad's name. Her dad also, did a thing. Mary Wollstonecraft wrote one novel that I'm going to say is kind of a slog.
You really like that word today.
Yeah, because a lot of this literature is bad. It's bad in the way that, early examples of something are bad, where they haven't quite tightened it.
Like every movie made before 1986. I stand by that.
Specifically, the year you were born.
Yes.
You were saying that anything that happened when you were not in the world, you're like a reverse. I had a professor once tell me that the philosopher Hans Gadamer, she did an interview with him when she was in grad school, and it was the end of his life. I can't even remember if that's his first name. We're just calling him Hans Gadamer. He might have had another first name.
Okay.
I'm not a real Gadamer.
We come from really different worlds, is what I'm realizing right now.
I'm not a Gadamer head.
What does that mean? What the fuck are the words you are saying to me right now? What does that mean?
She told me she did an interview with him at the end of his life.
Uh-huh.
And he'd been a sort of let's call it one of the Frankfurt School type Marxist adjacent kind of guy. So probably
their generation Zizek.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he'd gotten really interested in the apocalypse and was convinced that the world was ending right as he was dying.
Perfect. Because he's there can be no existence beyond me.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
It was it was super weird.
I mean, I kind of like that. But I imagine that everybody probably thinks that movies only started to get good around the year that you were born. Because I feel like something about our attention spans culturally and socially shift to adapt to the way media has been presented to us throughout our life. So then when you consume media that came from before your life, sometimes you're like, this is fucking slow and weird and boring.
I will say, one of my favorite movies is Holiday, which is Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, probably 1937 or 38 or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things from a visual perspective, the plot, whatever, it's one of those, it's a screwball comedy from the 30s.
Right.
There are scenes where, because so many of those actors came out of a theater and specifically vaudeville tradition, that are just strikingly beautiful in a way that I don't know how to explain, where they're doing weird acrobatics and goofing off.
Okay. I mean, there are always exceptions. My exception is the movie How to Murder Your Wife.
Jack Lemmon?
I don't think it's Jack Lemmon, actually, but it is that era of 1960s comedy, and this movie is one of the exceptions to me. This is an older movie. It is very, very engaging and entertaining from start to finish. I find myself wanting nothing after I watch this film. I'm perfect, 10 out of 10, no notes. Great movie. There's something in it called the Gloppa Machine.
Oh, I do remember this.
Yeah, I probably made you watch it. Yeah, because I love this movie. So there are exceptions, but in general, I get this. There's this idea that it's just people perfect a craft over time, and I think the more people work on something, you build on what people have figured out kind of works for the artists who came before you, and we just kind of adapt and get fine-tune things and figure out better what's fun. It's almost like pop music too. Lots of people hate pop music, but if you think about pop music as a science, I don't particularly enjoy listening to pop music, which I suspect has something to do with my age, because I do know that as you get older, you hear sounds differently. So when I was younger, I could listen to more pop music, but as I get older, it feels just shrill and grating to me in a way it didn't used to. And the target market for pop music is tweens, very young people, because they're most likely to spend money on it. So they're scientifically engineering these songs to have the maximum kind of hit factor and punch for young listeners, and it's very cool how they can perfect it so much and it becomes formulaic and they know what they're doing, and I think that is in itself an art form.
I mean,
right?
I do remember you had held this theory as long as I've known you, because I remember you once saying because progression, it's why Oasis is better than the Beatles.
Yes, I do maintain Oasis is better than the Beatles to this day. I definitely think so.
I was I don't. I don't know. I have a different, that's not, I will say,
I also think Dead Kennedys are better than the Beatles for a similar reason.
I don't like the Dead Kennedys.
I know, we have opposite tastes in everything.
Yeah, I like the people, there's music made by bad people. That's my thing.
Yeah.
But in any case, so Fat Tech, yada, yada, yada. We're on Frankenstein. I feel like we kind of know the story. Like, Victor Frankenstein, he's another, like, little Faustian guy. There's a reason why it was called Prometheus Unbound. You know, we're not going to talk too much about Frankenstein. The one I actually do want to talk a little bit about, Madeline, who's my favorite writer.
Oh, it's the Jane Austen.
Jane fucking Austen.
It's Jane Austen. I know this. Audience, can you guess how I feel about Jane Austen?
Have you read a Jane Austen
It's
novel?
very boring. I cannot make it through a Jane Austen novel.
Okay, so all of the things that we love about novels, right?
That we? Who's we?
Like, people.
You don't know what I love about novels.
I do, because you made me read all those fucking Tom Robbins novels.
I was in high school, and I very much enjoyed Tom Robbins in high school, and I stand by that. It was very fun. I think that books should be fun. Novels should be fun.
No, she is so... Okay, so... Jane Austen, the first thing she ever wrote, not published, but like the first thing she ever wrote was like History of England, which was this like short pithy thing where she was like, King George the whatever like died because he was stupid and boring. And it's very funny and pithy. She's a teenager, whatever. But Northanger Abbey, which was the first thing she ever wrote in 1803, but wasn't published till the end of her life in 1818, is a satire of Gothic romance. Right, and so it's about Catherine Morland, who's like bookish young tomboy who, because she gets really obsessed with Gothic romance novels, I think like she's like reading Twilight, kind of shit, decides that she's Kristen Stewart in Twilight, right? And even though she's meeting like normal like 19th century versions of frat boys, she is convinced that everything is, like, Edward and Jacob and all of that shit. And, like, she keeps thinking there are, like, private doorways and there's, like, a murder plot afoot and everything's going to be, like, murder and Gothic horror. And then everything's just normal. It's very funny. It's very charming. She wrote it when I think she was, like, 19 or something.
Got it.
But, like, all the things people love about novels.
Not me.
As a genre.
Distinctly omitting me, apparently.
No, you included.
Me included?
The things that, like, make a novel, right? Like, the free and direct discourse thing, like, the thing where, like, the author, like, can talk about what's in another character, like, in a character's head, and then, like, also talk to you, the reader, in a way that's, like, we're in on it together. I'm telling you a story.
Yeah.
I can tell you what's going on in, like, Catherine's head. That's Jane Austen. She did that. Like, she
invented that?
I don't know if she invented that. She perfected it.
Okay.
Right? Just if you haven't read Jane Austen...
I find it quite boring.
Okay.
You know what I think is probably more fun to read than Jane Austen? One of those terrible, trashy romance novels you pick up at, like, the drugstore. I
mean, that's literally what Northanger Abbey is making fun of.
Yeah, I think read that instead.
I think... she's great.
That's my vote.
There's also a really great movie that stars... what's her name from Felicity? The actress?
I don't know. I've never seen that show.
Or The Americans, if you're like a more modern whatever person.
Carrie Russell?
Carrie Russell.
I have seen The Americans.
They're called Austen Land.
It's kind of impressive you and I have been friends for so long. We really do like radically different things.
I mean, what would we talk about if we liked the same things?
That's true. This is why we fight constantly, and you can hear us fight more on our Patreon.
Yeah, okay. Just tying it all back.
I'm plugging it, yeah.
Okay, so the last one, and this is our prehistory, and then Madeline will be talking about the history part of it. Yeah. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is E.T.A. Hoffman's Night Pieces, and specifically a story called The Sandman. Obviously, other things happen in like horror type genre stuff, but The Sandman is important specifically because it inspired an essay that is going to structure how I talk about horror movies for much of this.
Okay.
Called The Uncanny... Whoa, hello.
Do you guys like our horror movie sound effects?
Jump scares about.
Yeah. Fork is really taking her jump scare duty seriously.
So, like a lot of like sort of gothic horror stuff and early modern horror stuff, it's kind of a blend of like folk tales and then like very modern shit.
Okay.
So, and it's also written in epistolary form, which like that was how like a lot of shit was written.
What does that mean?
Letters.
Okay.
Dear Madeline, I'm in East Hollywood, and I saw...
The bus is late. I'll be there 30 minutes later than you thought.
I saw someone, and I tried to offer them Narcan. It turns out they were just passed out drunk.
Oh, yeah, that did happen. Dear David, no worries. I will drive you home after, so you don't have to take the bus both ways.
Everyone is peeing on the bus.
On the bus, like... You do, yeah.
Okay, so it's this guy Nathaniel, and he's like writing to his friend, and he's like, "Yo, buddy, when I was a kid, there was this guy named Coppelius who was like a lawyer, and my dad was like some sort of scientist. Real unclear what's going on there. Anyway, Coppelius came over once, and I had like this fear that Coppelius was going to take my eyes. And I like went downstairs one night, and Coppelius was there with my dad, and they're doing these weird experiments, and then like I screamed because the experiments were weird, and Coppelius picked me up and threw me in the fire and then picked me out of the fire."
This is kind of sounding like Reanimator.
This is what I'm saying. A lot of horror shit.
Yeah.
And then he starts pulling me apart like I'm a toy, and is like, "Your eyes, look at these eyes," and then pulls my eyes out and puts them back in. And
Justified fear.
Yeah. And then my dad is like, "No, don't take my son. I'll die instead."
Lots of sacrifice.
Many years later, Nathaniel is like writing to his friend again, and he's like, "Look, I just met this like guy named Coppola who's like an optometrist," which was just like, I'm just saying, I had a thing with a guy named with a similar name with the eyes.
Yeah.
And Coppola was friends with this other guy whose name I have forgotten. I know I have it written down, but I've lost my fucking place. Who gives a shit?
Let's give him a fake name.
It's like Scaparelli or
Cletus.
something. Cletus. Okay, it's Cletus. It's Cletus.
Okay.
It's fine. So Cletus has a daughter named Olympia.
Why are you doing air quotes for all these? I'm the
You'll
only
see
one. Oh, okay.
a daughter.
Okay,
Air
dear
quotes.
audience, this is in air quotes, so I am very.
A daughter.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
I'm trying to do it with my voice too.
I think it's working. Okay. I think yeah.
So,
you're doing great.
Meanwhile, the guy Nathaniel's been writing to, Nathaniel is betrothed to that guy's sister, Clara.
Okay, Cletus' sister, Clara.
No. Cletus not involved yet in the victim. So Nathaniel meets Cletus and his daughter, Olympia, who he only sees from like a window across the street. And he's like, "She's so hot.
Yeah.
Oh my God, hottest woman I've ever seen."
Right.
And then they go to a party, and there's Olympia, and he like dances with Olympia.
Jump scare.
He's like, "This is the hottest girl who's ever fucking existed. Oh my God." And everyone's like, "She's kind of dumb. Have you noticed how dumb she is?"
God, it's me when I date.
And he's like, "No, she's so fucking hot and cool, and we had the best time." And everyone's like, "I don't know if you're seeing what we're seeing over here." And then one day, Nathaniel happens to walk in on Cletus, or whatever the guy's name is, and Coppola, and they're arguing because it turns out Olympia is an automaton, like a robot, and Coppola had provided the eyes, and they're arguing over who made her lifelike.
Oh, this is cool.
It's cool.
This is cool.
This is also a good, like, E.T.A. Hoffman, fucking great writer, highly recommend.
I'm into this. This might be the very slim intersection of our interests.
And, right, it drives Nathaniel mad. If he's like, "Oh my God, I fell in love with an automaton. What does that say about me? Who the fuck am I?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, we said she was dumb, like a robot." You fucking idiot.
Don't you remember that whole time we were like, she's kind of robotic, she's moving weird and robot-y, robot. Did you hear something clanging like it was metal, like a robot? And he's like, I missed all of that.
Yeah. So he goes and says, like...
all the silver flags he missed.
And then...
she's a robot. Get it? It's metal. Anyway, sorry. Okay, continue.
The steel... yeah, I got it.
Okay, yeah.
So he goes insane. He tries to he becomes convinced that Clara, his betrothed, is also a robot.
Why not? I would think everybody's a robot at this point, yeah.
And then eventually he tosses himself from, like a cliff in order to, he's like, maybe I'm a robot. Maybe everyone's a robot.
Oh, yeah, I can see this. I've been there.
This is a very, Descartes style fucking thing, right? This is, I can't remember which of the meditations is like, I look outside my window and I wonder, what if everyone is robots?
Wow, I missed that one, but admittedly I've not paid much attention to Descartes.
But, right, because it's like, it's a story about the problem of other minds and like how I know that you have anything going on in your head.
How do you know I'm not a robot?
Or how do you know I'm not a robot? It's a fucking problem.
It's a problem. It's a real problem we all need to care about. Everyone could be a robot. Blade Runner. I see where it came from now.
So you're seeing a lot of the tropes come in, and like Freud writes this essay called The Uncanny, and the reason I think it's important is like the uncanny is like the sort of like thing we all fucking argue about or like what people argue about when they talk about horror.
Yes.
And like, what is horror? Why is it scary? Shit like that. Right? And so Freud, he's like taking off of this essay that I'm not sure anyone's ever read by this guy Jansch.
Jansch. Terrible name.
Yeah, which is why no one has read him.
Yeah.
I will say there is a fabulous essay by Eric Santner about another Freud book, Moses and Monotheism. Fantastic book. The Eric Santner essay coins the term abydinality, which is about the sexual desire to cite things. Like in footnotes.
Wow.
But that essay is very distracting to read because one of the scholars that Freud was thinking about but not saying anything about, and I'm sure this is pronounced differently in German, was Assman.
Oh no! Oh no!
And
worst name. The names are getting worse.
And so it's really, so Freud is talking about a concept in German called the Unheimlich, which is it's the uncanny, but also you can think the unhomely, and he defines the unhomely, or like and he's like, look, it's in this like really ambiguous relationship with like the canny or the homely, like the friendly, the familiar, but in German that has this ambiguous thing that also means the secret. Like the
okay,
right, like
it's like the unknown.
The Heimlich means like something that is friendly and familiar, but also something that is secret.
Okay, got it.
Right, and so Freud is like, look, there's this fucking thing that where it's like the Unheimlich is also what is secret and foreign and hidden. So like horror, uncanniness is this like conjunction of this ambiguity between what is familiar and common to us and that we understand, and that within that there is something that is like jump scare, right? That is like freaky. And he uses the Sandman to talk about that. And like all things in Freud had by this point given up the seduction theory in favor of...
What was the seduction theory?
So the seduction theory was that like anxiety, hysteria, all the things that like psychological unwellness comes from like infantile seduction by usually a family member.
Okay.
Right.
God, this guy was weird. Okay.
And there is a very famous, fabulous book by Janet Malcolm about this guy who was convinced that Freud gave up the seduction theory because of his association with this like weird experimental dentist named Fleiss.
There's a lot of dental work involved in here. Oh no, optometrist was the last guy.
But,
sorry.
Who had famously disfigured one of Freud's patients.
Oh.
And so Freud, instead of blaming Fleiss for disfiguring the patient,
mm-hmm.
had to attribute all of that patient's like subsequent psychological trauma to the fact that her unconscious was producing these like fucked up sexual fantasies.
God.
So right.
Weird, real weird.
Also in the same letters, in like Freud's letters to Fleiss, he confesses over and over to a point that is frankly very strange how much he is enjoying reading the like Witch's Hammer and all the books about torturing witches in medieval times.
Wow.
And at some point says psychoanalysis is my version of discovering witches. It was very funny. Freud,
very strange.
I love Freud so much because he is fun. Not because I
don't feel like he's fun.
No, because it's like everything's so wackadoo.
It is really wackadoo.
That you're just like, what the fuck are you going to come up with next,
okay,
buddy?
It's kind of, yeah, he's kooky.
He's kooky, but so, right.
It's like watching Russell Brand. You're like, I don't agree with 90% of the shit that comes out of your mouth, but I find myself interested in what comes next, I suppose.
Okay, so here's my theory. If There's a very funny Mark Fisher essay that is like, Russell Brand was right, or like Russell Brand is like, just like
Mark Fisher was weird too.
They're all those
Everybody's
fucking
weird.
Goldsmiths,
Yeah,
English motherfuckers.
I think okay, we agree on this actually. Wow,
it's like,
people do love Mark Fisher, and we're like, I'm not so into this. People get a little upset about it.
I will say, it is like, there was a period where everyone went through, including me, a Mark Fisher phase. You go through it, and you're like,
yeah, I did not.
Like,
I read it and was like, what the fuck?
Well, because it's like, okay, like, it's like your post Frankfurt School, where it's like, well, even the conditions that were like, what the fuck do we do with Marxism now?
Yeah.
Of like the 50s and 60s, like those are no longer applicable, and so you're like looking around for some guy who's like,
capitalist realism does have some things that are worth reading.
That mostly come from other people. Let's just point that out.
Yeah. But he does have a very accessible writing style. He's very easy. I would rather people read Mark Fisher than Zizek.
Zizek is such a fucking corny ass.
It makes no sense, also. But yeah, so. I think that there is some redeeming stuff, but that is really interesting.
Okay, so back to the uncanny.
Yeah.
Freud is like, it's this Unheimlich thing, and the Unheimlich thing is the manifestation of the castration complex. Okay. Which is like, men don't want their dicks taken away from them. And like, you should take that both as like a literal thing of like, I don't want my dick taken away from me. And he's like, look, the eyes are a stand-in for the dick, which...
What?
There we go. So the reason is... as many people after Freud will point out, this is about the eyes being a form of the capability to do signifying, to like represent the fucking world, which is your thing as a dude that women don't do.
Okay, right.
I am not.
David hates women. You heard it here first.
I am not agreeing with his position. I'm just trying to explain what Freud was on about.
David thinks women's eyes don't work.
I don't. Yes, I absolutely.
David walks around, and when he meets a woman and he likes her, the first thing he does is give her a pair of bifocals.
Well, no, that would make her signify, which would like.
Oh, you don't want her to signify.
Well, because then she would
if
on the Freudian term. If she's wearing glasses, you take
them and you break them, and you
she's
go, "Not
basically
for you.
No longer a woman. Then
no gender for you. Yeah. Okay, I see. Gender equals glasses.
Which one of the things I was like, oh, okay, so like, and like the storehouse of things that horror stuff is about. You do have to mention like Macbeth and like there are ghosts.
There are ghosts in Macbeth. That's true. Shakespeare did some horror.
And like speaking of signifying shit and like the capacity to signify in the world, one of the most famous and coolest fucking speeches in like the whole of English literature is like Lady Macbeth's speech where she's looking at her stupid weak husband and she's like I would like to do power and like regicide and like kill a king so we can do have power.
Yeah.
And this weak ass motherfucker is like, oh, I don't know if that's right. I kind of like that guy.
Yeah.
And she has the speech where I can't remember the whole thing, but she's like, unsex me now, because like the whole thing is like, I would like to not be a woman, so that I can do power.
Right. It's a very 80s form of feminism, I will say. 1980s.
1580s.
1580s, 1980s.
Sure, yeah, it's all the same.
By the time it gets to the 80s, this is the type of feminism we're seeing.
But, right, like, you know, so this is like kind of the storehouse of things we're working with in horror, which is like horror and like the way people talk about horror, like the first kind of thing that anyone says about it is like, it's this kind of thing where it's kind of like your home, but then within it, there's something fucked up. And that fucked upness has to do with your capacity or incapacity to represent the thing.
Got it.
Right? So it's like the unrepresentable, fucked up thing within what should be deeply familiar.
That is horror.
That's like the first thing people say about it, and people will have other things to say about it. But so that's, I think, like an incomplete peripatetic type understanding of horror as a literary genre.
Okay. Well, I like this. So one of the things that I've seen people talk about when they talk about horror as well is that there are two types of horror. That there is art horror and then there's natural horror. And natural horror are just the horrors of the world. So like, you know, for example, we look at the news and we see a hurricane destroyed Asheville, North Carolina. And you're like, that is a natural horror. That is horrific. That is terrifying. That is...
What about where's the chemical plants? Is that natural horror?
The chemical plants is in Atlanta. That is also considered natural horror because it's just naturally occurring. It's not like naturally occurring in that it came from nature, but it is a thing that occurs in the world as we encounter it. Nobody had to write that.
It's the movie Contagion.
Right. So Art horror, by contrast, is something that did not already exist in the world that somebody brings into the world via art. So this could be literature, like David was just talking about. It could also be film. It could be storytelling. It could be a painting. It could be a picture. It could be anything that has to be created by a person intentionally. I guess theoretically, if you intentionally blew up the power plant as like a statement, then that would be art horror.
But I mean, I feel like, is that within, because, right, it sounds like there's a distinction being made between the sort of implied author and like the author, in the sense that it's like, it's still, if like a group of terrorists blow up the power plant, that's still within the range of natural horror because it takes place within the frame of the story.
Yeah, that's true.
If the author shows up and is like, I'm putting my little authorial thumb very conspicuously and I'm just flicking the power plant and like making the chemical thing happen, that seems like it would be
art horror, yeah. So this is something people talk about a lot, and then usually when we talk about horror, we just talk about art horror because, you know, you can analyze the world around you, but if you analyze the horrors of the world around you, that's different than analyzing media.
Do you think there's slippage, though? Because I think about movies like the like Texas Chainsaw Massacre types, like slasher type shit or whatever, where generally speaking, nothing supernatural happens.
That would still be art horror, though, because it's media that's been created.
Oh, okay. So that's I guess where I'm confused.
Yeah. So natural horror would be things that are not created to stand alone. Okay. So it's not necessarily never media. Like what is it? Faces of Death. Do you remember that?
Which is like a half fake, right? Like
if you looked at the concept of Faces of Death, which is a movie that shows a lot of things and people and animals dying, and it's very horrible, and I don't recommend anybody watch it, but I, like many people, had to watch it at a drug dealer's house in 8th grade for some reason. That movie is considered natural horror if we didn't know that actually a lot of it is fake. It's presented as being like a documentary. So if you were to watch like a documentary about, I don't know, like the Vietnam War.
Or I'm thinking
that would still be natural horror even though you're watching a movie because it is a real thing that happened.
I'm thinking about like the Mondo series of like the like Italian sort of predecessors of Faces of Death, where it's like, here are like women chasing a man and beating him to death.
Yeah,
and,
is
like,
that real?
Papua New Guinea, and it's like represented as documentary even though it's fake and bullshit.
Right. So those kinds of things would be natural horrors, would be like things that just occur in the world. Like art horror would be something that's created to be a form of art of some kind. And that's usually how people differentiate between the two when they talk about horror. So when we talk about horror in film, that's really what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about, like, say you watch like a documentary about a serial killer. That's not considered horror. So
it's like the specific affect. Oh, one of the things I forgot to mention is like when you talk about the ancient Greek stuff, and I think this goes easily here, it's, you know, one of the first people who like theorized what you did when you did art is like Aristotle in the Poetics, and he was like, look, it's like tragedy shows you these like negative emotions and then allows you to experience catharsis from them because they are about these actions that happen in the world that are exacerbated or exaggerated.
Yeah.
And that seems like relevant to the thing that you're talking about.
I think it is relevant, yeah. So when we talk about horror films, the first thing that most people attribute as being like the first horror film came out in 1896 when film was still pretty new. It was called The Haunted Castle, or The House of the Devil in English, but it was made in French, and it was 3 minutes long, and it was spooky. It had animated skeletons, ghosts, bats, an incarnation of the devil, cauldrons, but it wasn't intended to actually frighten anybody.
I'm imagining this is something like the like Mie guy, like the like rocket shooting into the moon's eye or whatever.
Oh, this
like,
era. Yeah.
This is that kind of vibe.
And also, really, one of the first kind of things that happened in film that did scare people wasn't even intended to be, like, horrific as we think of it. But it's because audiences weren't very used to watching movies.
Is this the train?
It's the train. Yeah. So it's when people would go to the movies and a train would be coming towards you on the screen, and it actually did terrify people. People ducked, people yelled, and it's just because they weren't used to processing something like that. So in the beginning stages of film, we had like an interesting relationship with what was horrifying and what wasn't, because you had these things that today we would think of as generally being like horror tropes, like ghosts, skeletons, but it wasn't presented as scary. And then you have just like a train moving on the screen, and it's terrifying to people. I
mean, one of the things that's obvious here is like there's like slippage between the two distinction, or like the two things you're distinguishing between natural horror and art horror.
Yeah.
In the sense that like the horrifying affect that people experience, like that sort of like affective response, comes from a slippage between art horror, like doing something that is fundamentally about mimesis and imitation, and experiencing it as like a literal train is going to run me over.
Right,
in this
and
fucking
that's
movie
the thing.
theater.
So, but really what people were afraid of was the movies. They were afraid of going to the movies because it was a new experience to them, and it was, like you were talking about, it's like something that kind of feels familiar because you're looking at things that are real life, but at the same time it's not familiar because you're in this artificial room with this artificial screen and something's being projected at you, and it's not your everyday.
So I'm going to suppose that you're going to talk about the fact that, like, the more movies become familiar, the more they have to rely upon innovation and, like, jump scares and weird shit, which is, like...
And this is really how horror gets solidified. The more people get used to horror, the more the ante has to be upped.
Yeah.
So that's why when you look at older movies, this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, when you look at older horror movies, they look almost quaint. They don't seem scary. But at the time, film was new, and... these things were developed to suit the audience and the attention span and the palate and kind of the cognitive reality of what moviegoers back in that time were experiencing. And I think that's why so often when we look at modern horror movies compared to older horror movies, there's a huge disconnect in the presentation because the people who are making movies are making them for us, the audience that exists today at the moment that they are making it. And we as society progresses and develops, people change and the way we process media changes. And
it's also, I mean, there is a bit of a, like, the logic of addiction going on here in the sense that
you gotta go more.
You gotta keep up in the ante.
Yeah, because you've become, what's the word where you get
desensitized?
Yeah.
And this is like leotards. I think one of the things that's worth talking about is like the relationship of the horror to the sublime, and like Kant, in the sense that like the sublime is the thing that overwhelms us and makes us feel object-like, right? And in like the modern postmodern era, because like the transcendental sublime is not accessible to us, we get like the capitalist sublime, which is like an overwhelming complex of like material conditions that is too complicated for us to understand. But you have to keep upping the ante because you keep being able to understand the fucking thing.
Oh yeah, okay,
right?
That makes sense. Yeah, totally. So when we talk about horror as it first came about as a genre in film, really it emerged between the years like 1900 and 1920, but it was just highly influenced by literary classics. Like this is really, we didn't quite know how to do it, so we're like, well, they've kind of figured out how to do horrific things in literature.
But that's also,
so let's just take that and put it on a screen. That's
also still the case. Like Stephen King basically just exists to like have his shit made into movies.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I have a friend who listens, jump scare fork, who listens to jump scare fork again. She's really going for it.
No, this is okay. We've gone from like jump scare movie to slasher at this point.
Yeah, Fork's just lurking in the corners, ready to at any moment. It's a monster movie, and it's Fork. So there's this podcast called Just King Things. It's all about Stephen King books and movies, and there's just been so many books and movies that have been made about Stephen King that they're able to do a whole podcast just based off that media. But it is true, we kind of are like this machine of making horror media now. But back in like the year 1900, 1920, the types of books and literature that they were making movies about would have been things like Frankenstein. This is like where we see the first adaptation of Frankenstein come about, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or the werewolf, So this is where people were really experimenting with how to adapt this idea of horror from literature to a screen in a way that made sense for a still relatively new movie-going audience.
I mean, one of the things that's like with the Frankenstein, like I've seen the early version of Frankenstein or whatever, and there's like a whole ass middle section that's like like the creature or whatever being like, I'm a pretty smart guy. I have like interiority. I experience the world. And, like, you can't do that in a movie. Like you can't you can't be like, here's like we're gonna free and direct discourse someone's entire interior like life. And I'm like, you can do a voiceover, but no one likes that. Nobody likes the fucking voiceover.
So basically, as a result of this relationship, by trying to figure out like the media and its relationship inherent to the audience and what the audience is able to receive and how it will be interpreted, there's always going to be, you have to think of film as like a dialogue between the audience and the filmmaker. There's always some conversation happening, and this is where we get into like the politics of the horror film, because the horror film is always popping up in dialogue with the rest of society about what's going on in society around it. And that's what we're really going to try to focus on for the rest of the episode. So from 1920s and 1930s, we've really figured out horror more as a genre. We call this the golden age of horror. This is also the first time that the word horror was used to describe this genre, and the first horror stars would emerge, like Bela Lugosi.
Mm-hmm. Or, my favorite, local LA hero, Vincent Price.
Vincent Price, yes. There were also silent film classics going on still at this time. There's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, came out in 1920. That was like this mind control carnival movie with murder. Then there was, of course, Nosferatu, 1922, famous vampire movie, considered the best horror movie of all time by many people. Yeah, that one actually has stood up pretty well. And then you had on the flip side the talkies, where we get to see another iteration of Frankenstein. We get the Mummy. We get another iteration of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
We get White Zombie. Speaking of Rob Zombie.
Yes. And the public reaction to this during the 1920s and 30s was actually concern. People were like, hey, this stuff's actually kind of disturbing. Like, why are we making films about this? And some of the films that were released at this time were considered so shocking that they had to be completely edited with huge chunks cut down to the point where you can't even find the original anymore because it was so aggressively edited to make it considered suitable or palatable for the mainstream audience. Others were just fully banned for decades. So right away we see the relationship between horror and censorship being a thing. Governments want to control what information is going out to people, and horror, nobody's quite sure if this is information they want people to receive.
And I mean, it's like worth considering that like stories of bloodshed and murder and like gore had been a part of like human life for forever. Right. Like, it's not like, oh my god, like we've never heard of someone telling a story about murder or zombies.
Just the new medium of movies, and it being quite sensational. So it's the same thing you think about when you think about the conversations that happened in the 90s and early 2000s about like violence in video games. It's like we are exposed to violence all day long in society. Video games are just a new medium where you're seeing violence because it's a form of storytelling, and our storytelling always involves violence of some kind. Not always, but always has.
You know what I've always wondered? Because that was the very, like, Columbine era of concern. Yeah. Why people weren't like, you know what we should really ban? The fucking black trench coats.
They did try to ban that. Oh, yeah. When I was in 7th grade, we weren't allowed to wear all black anymore, and our friend group in particular was really aggressively targeted for how we dressed, and they paid extra attention to us, and they did extra locker raids on everybody in our friend group because of how we dressed. So many rules were passed at the time that you could not wear black trench coats on campuses, and you could not wear all black on campus.
No, I'm talking about going after, like, Nordstrom Rack.
Oh, no. At schools, they did, though. At schools, they were like, you cannot do that. Which, again, it's like these futile attempts at censorship, because you're like, the trench coats aren't making people asshole murderers, just like the movies aren't harming people, probably. But we'll get into some things later on where you're like, well, actually, we'll see that films did have the capacity to have some significant impacts on people's psyche that we weren't even realizing were happening at the time, that actually could be an argument for if you were a person who favored censorship, which I'm not, necessarily, unless it's like, I have complicated feelings about free speech. I don't value free speech above public safety, which I think most people, even people who think they're free speech advocates, when presented with specific scenarios, would actually agree with that. I
mean, you also fantasize quite often about being some manner of dictator who controls everything.
There is also that
so...
that I want to be a dictator. I want to have my own little country where I dictate everything, and if you say something I don't like...
I think, like, the ideal situation is...
I steal your eyes. You didn't let me finish the consequence.
Oh.
I'm doing the eye stealing thing. I hadn't thought of that until 20 minutes ago, but I'm taking it now.
You are symbolically castrating me.
Yeah.
Live on a podcast. Okay.
I'm going to take your eyes. I just decided I'm adding it into my dictator list. Oh, yeah. So, 1940s and 1950s, we get to the atomic era. And we have more adaptations still, again, literature classics like Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy. And the reason we keep doing these reiterations is, again, because the old versions just aren't hitting with the new audience the way they used to. We need different things, different ways of relating to the media, different storytelling kind of strategies, different visuals that will reach a new audience in a different way, because like we said, society's advancing, developing, and what scares people, what resonates with people, what people are engaging with, it's going to change. It's going to change over time, which is the same reason I said I don't like media that's produced before the year I was born. It's not made for me. It wasn't made with me in mind.
I mean, it's like not even about like advancement in some sort of linear way.
It's not advancement.
It's just like, right, because it's like
just the development of society and how it goes.
You're just gonna make horror movies about like atomic shit when everyone is just like, oh fuck, we just made an atomic bomb. Holy fuck, like that. And now we're like, look, man, we've had
We've had atomic bombs.
They have, like, that fucking clock.
Yeah, so, but this is exactly what happened in the atomic era. There was a huge fear of political conflict globally. World War II was happening, or had just ended, depending on what part of this era you come into. So people were really afraid of nuclear weapons. The United States famously dropped to nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. We saw what happened to human beings when they were exposed to nuclear warfare. It was horrifying. It was horror. So this was obviously introduced into horror tropes, and we started to have a lot more movies about nuclear fallout and radioactivity, and they were scary to people because it was something that could feel real. It was something that was on people's mind. So the most famous movie that came out around this time, based on this, Godzilla.
Okay.
That's a nuclear radiation fallout movie.
Can I do a 1 minute digression?
Yeah, what is it?
My favorite of the Cold War era, like, what to do if you get nuked movies is I think it's a Town Called X, which is about what would happen if an atomic bomb fell on Portland, Oregon.
Oh! Wow.
And wow. Just as someone who lived in the Pacific Northwest for a long time.
Yeah. You liked that one.
I was just like, that's cool.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I'm interested, I will say. There was also a pretty popular movie called The Incredible Shrinking Man. And at the same time, there were also Western fears of being invaded. Because people were like, what if the commies come invade us? Ah! But the way that this manifested in horror was about alien invasions. Mm-hmm. So we had War of the Worlds, we had When Worlds Collide. And this wasn't the first time we had seen alien invasion movies. Another one of those examples of an old movie that to me, I still like, still feels good to me, is The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh, I like that one.
I like it too. So that happened before the atomic era. But it was still... like, we still had those, but these really ramped up, basically. Yeah. They became more engaging. They became more relevant to people. And they totally reflected political fears going on, what our governments were up to abroad. By the 1960s, we'd had a few decades of people getting acclimated to horror. And this is when we really start to see that upping the ante thing happen. Mm-hmm. Like, people were getting desensitized to the old scare tactics that used to work. And there was more of a demand for more extreme things to happen on the screen. So the customer was demanding more from horror movies. They wanted more gore, more terror, more over-the-top production. And this is around the time that George Romero produced the famous zombie movie, Night of the Living Dead, 1968, for around $100,000 only. And it went on to gross $30 million worldwide. So this was a huge success.
And forgive me, that's right, like... one of the things that is notable about that movie is the prominence of, like, the black character, like the black protagonist.
Which we will get into when we talk about the role of race in the politics of horror movies. But that is something to put a pin in, because this was revolutionary for a lot of different reasons. And people today, it has a complicated legacy from what I have seen within the black community, but we're going to talk about all the details about that.
Okay.
But another thing to think about, though, is that in the 1960s, there's a lot of, you know, like civil rights issues going on. So Night of the Living Dead did have a black protagonist, and that was something that was really meaningful in 1968. Yeah. From the 1970s to 1980s, we kind of have a tale of two genres happening. Like, the popularity of horror splits off in these two directions. And the first one is occultism. Now, occult horror is actually my favorite genre of horror. And this was probably had something to do with the satanic panic fears popping up in the 80s and late 70s. Everyone's suspicion of, like, Satanism involved in these new music genres that were popping up, like heavy metal. And they were like, oh God, like, we're afraid of heavy metal having something to do with the devil and our children getting taken in by Satanism. So this is where we see the rise in the occultism stuff.
I'm assuming this is like Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, shit like that.
Exorcist in 1973 is really what started this trend in horror for sure. And this was obviously a movie about demonic possession. Rosemary's Baby, also a movie about impregnating a woman with the son of Satan. Very relevant because there's a prequel to Rosemary's Baby that just came out called Apartment 7A that I just watched the other day. And
any good?
I actually thought it was pretty good. I don't know what other people think of it. It has the chick with the cool face who is in Ozark.
I don't know.
Okay, well, if anybody
this
that
is also
means something.
The Omen. I love The Omen so fucking much.
So The Omen came out in 1976. That was also a book about the Antichrist, or a movie about the Antichrist. That was another one of these movies that did fuel this kind of occultism.
I will say there are one thing to put a pin in. I can't remember the name of the author, but the guy who wrote the book on which The Exorcist is based. Like, in the, like, there's, like, a bunch of, like, weird anti-communist shit in the, like, beginning. And I think, right, you can think about things as being multiple things at once, which is, like, satanic panic. Also, this, like, fear of the other is like really a big thing, and it's like because it's a contagion that is taken from like the Near East through the excavation of like ancient site, right? All of that shit. Totally. It's in there.
Yeah.
In any case.
It is all in there. That's totally true. And this is also where we start to see the Stephen King books get adapted to films, like you were talking about. We have Carrie in 1976, which not super occult, but she does have supernatural powers.
Yeah.
So there's also The Shining, 1980, David's favorite horror movie. Poltergeist, 1982, a movie I grew up with. This is one of those movies that came out before I was born, but it was part of my childhood. I watched this movie a lot, and I liked it because there were little kids in it.
Yeah, it was. I remember being like distinctly afraid watching that movie when I was like 8 or 9, and being like, "Oh shit!" And it's also, I'm gonna say, a movie about an uncanny house.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there. Actually, a lot like The Shining, kind of uncanny house.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, uncanny house. I would say The Shining for sure. So in the horror, Ellen Walker writes, the myth of Halloween sadism would grip American suburbia as paranoid parents searched their children's trick-or-treat bags for hidden razor blades gifted by evil neighbors. This, according to sociologists Joel Best and Gerald T. Horiuchi, was a symbolic expression of the rising levels of distrust towards outsiders experienced by Americans in the aftermath of the 1960s, a decade punctuated by social progressivism and cultural upheaval. So we see that while we have this new suspicion going on, people are like, what if everything's Satanist? What if our neighbors are evil? This kind of just general panic or fear is coming about, and it is tied in with all of these kind of occult kind of movies coming out. Mm-hmm. So just like this general suspicion, and also the Halloween sadism thing in particular is tied in with ideas of occultism too. So the second genre that the second subgenre, I'll say, that horror movies kind of leaned into in the 1970s and 80s was the slasher thing.
And I, again, because of the Rob Zombie thing, because I just associate those movies,
no,
I was like...
I don't think of those as slashers at all.
It's like a... But Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's a slasher.
Well, kind of. So that's a complicated genre to play. So... Mm-hmm. I don't like slasher movies because I feel like it's just a way to watch women get cut into pieces by an incel.
It's like...
it's too real. I'm like, I don't care about this.
Not in, like, I mean, in the sex sense, but it is pornographic. And
it is pornographic.
Like, where it's just like, oh, we're going to do gratuitous, like, naked women dying.
So, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out in 1974, and it did maybe kick off the slasher trend. But the thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that it followed a really different formula than the slashers that would come after it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was really... First of all, a lot of people tie this to the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. It was this idea that young people were representing just like fodder, meat to be consumed. There was a blatant disregard for young people, and especially the types of young people who were the victims in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There was also this idea of the fear of the outsider that went into it. There was this family that was really in their own way just trying to survive, and they were being invaded by this new youth movement that they didn't quite understand. There are a lot of ways to interpret Texas Chainsaw Massacre that are different than how we think of traditional slasher movies. Mm-hmm. In a slasher movie, usually something like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, which all came about around this time too, you have the bad guy with the knife, or knives if you're Freddy Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street and your hands are knives, right? Is that you come into a community of seemingly normal middle-class white people and you destroy their picture-perfect life. In Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you had a group of kids who interfered and showed up in these outsider space in their home and invaded them.
I mean, I actually have because all of the movies, or at least like the Friday the 13th and Halloween, it's always like a pre-existing trauma that happens.
Yes.
Right? Like that's like the clear...
And Nightmare on Elm Street too, because Freddy Krueger was killed by the local kids in town in a fire, and that's why he's disfigured, and that's why he's going after the kids of the town. He's like, this is to get revenge on what you've done to me.
I actually kind of like that sort of John Carpenter-y thing, where it's like, oh, there's something that's suppressed that these like kids don't realize predates them, that is just going to come back to fuck them.
Well, I mean, I think that Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, those are obviously good examples of slasher movies. And these are the ones we think of as being cult classics for a reason. But there was a whole slew of slasher movies that came after this that, you know, were campier and worse, and you could tell were just like money grabs, and they weren't these deep stories. They really were just bad guy with knife trying to stab a bunch of teenage girls. And you know, I would probably argue that coincided with women being seen as more liberated in society. By the 80s, we had that era of excess. We had the yuppie thing. We had a lot of women in professional jobs. women were starting to, even though they weren't actually on equal footing with men, they were starting to be perceived as being more on equal footing with men. And I think that really fueled a lot of, not the ones we talked about, like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, but the more trashy, campy, B kind of movies, seeing this, like, need to cut these women down on screen, to take them down a few pegs. Like, this is why I don't really like this as a genre so much, because it's usually, well, who does this fucking woman think she is?
So what's it, like, because I was asking you via text today, I was like, oh, it's like the Slumber Party Massacre type movies, or like there's like a cheerleader sorority massacre, but those were all weirdly directed by women, and it was specifically a, like, this is going to be a parody, but then the way it got marketed and taken up was not.
And we'll see that too with Jennifer's Body.
Yeah.
Once women start to enter directing horror as a genre, they have a different take on it, and the take tends to be pretty smart and good, but because people don't know how to market these movies that are intended for a women audience, they end up getting mismarketed towards men, and it takes people a long time to parse women's introduction into media like this. But there was, in the 80s and 70s, a huge just slew of generic movies that came out that most people can't even remember, that maybe you'd see at the drive-in movie theater, that was just like, you know, teenage girl takes her shirt off, gets stabbed to death. And you just see that play out over and over.
I mean, that's a popular trope across all genres.
You think so?
I mean, it is, right, like, you know, maybe not slashed, but like, objectified woman, something bad happens to her.
Yeah.
That is
totally,
like,
that's media. So by the 1990s and 2000s, people were a bit fatigued by horror, just because in the 80s there had been this huge, just, like I said, it was really like a slew, an onslaught of mediocre slasher movies that really followed the same pattern, and it was just kind of ridiculous. And I feel like what really broke people's fatigue with horror was Scream coming out in 1996.
Which was like a meta.
It was a meta kind of self-referential, almost satire horror movie. It revolutionized horror. It allowed horror to be self-referential. It allowed horror to have a sense of humor. And it was like, look, we can be smart and stupid all at the same time. We can do dumber things in the movie because we're aware that we're playing into the genre. And we can be smart by assuming you, the audience, are also fans of the genre and know what you're consuming. And we're all here to have a good time.
And I'm assuming, like, I Know What You Did Last Summer falls into this category as well.
I would not say that, because I Know What You Did Last Summer was not a smart movie.
No, I mean,
Scream was a smarter, funnier movie than I Know What You Did Last Summer. I Know What You Did Last Summer is one of those movies that try to capitalize on the success of Scream by being like, oh, we're back. Horror is back, baby. Let's do it. Final Destination too, but Final Destination, I think, is more of a cult classic than I Know What You Did Last Summer now.
I mean, they're both like sort of like winking, and
I don't feel like I Know What You Did Last Summer is
Scream,
at all.
For some reason,
yes.
I give a pass on the winking thing or whatever. I will say that became so. What's the fucking like horror parody type movies of like the early mid 2000s that all suck.
Oh, you mean like the movie Scary Movie?
Yes.
Yeah, that stuff I don't like. But in the 90s, Scream was the mainstream breakthrough success with this technique. But this is also when my favorite movie came out, Peter Jackson's Dead Alive. That was 1992. And it was so over the top that it was ridiculous. And it strikes you more as a comedy than a horror movie. Like, there's a scene where a dismembered large intestine stares at itself in the mirror and poses, obviously feeling quite pretty. There's a part where two zombies end up having a zombie baby together, and then this regular man who's not a zombie is like, I don't know how to take care of this zombie baby, so he takes it to the park for a lovely day out and tries to just mimic the moms out with their normal babies, but it's a zombie baby.
Wait, I have a question.
So it's trying to attack everyone?
Where does the like zombie phenomenon fit within the sort of like supernatural satanic panic on the one hand, or like let's kill a woman stuff on the other?
Well, so the zombie thing we're going to talk about in greater context when we talk about the racial elements, the racial political elements, because it had been something that came predominantly from Black culture.
Yeah.
So the rise of zombie movies really hit in the 1960s with civil rights stuff going on.
I mean, what's funny is like, because of, well, I'm sure we'll get to it, but like the complicated history of like zombies as like something within sort of like Caribbean stuff. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So the thing about the 90s is that this is when I really remember watching all of those really bad campy trauma films. Like Surf Nazis Must Die.
Great movie.
Yeah, things like this that were like just ridiculous and over the top. And this is when everybody kind of seemed to culturally acknowledge that the slasher movies of the 80s had made horror jump the shark. It was no longer a genre to be taken seriously. So the way to save horror as a genre was to allow us all to not take it seriously. To let us all laugh at it. And it's kind of like the 90s were a jump start. So once we were like, okay, we're allowed to laugh at it. We're allowed to be like, yeah, it's not so scary. That's okay. Then it kind of it was like a planned burning, of a forest.
I mean, I wonder about this because I think about, like, the 90s as generally, like, the 80s is sort of where this starts. But, like, in every fucking thing, there's, like, aesthetic exhaustion. This moment where people are just like, look, we kind of done it all.
Right, and we need something new.
Like, well, no, it's like, there's nothing left to do, so I guess we're just going to do it, but be funny about it.
Well, what ended up happening, actually, is that after, like, the Scream era, the Dead Alive era, the haha, it's ridiculous, let's laugh at it era, we did see that horror took a total 180 turn in the opposite direction. The thing I really think about from the early 2000s following this, where I was like, whoa, something's different in horror, is when 28 Days Later came out.
Oh, Fast Zombies.
2002, it revolutionized the zombie movie, in my experience, and made zombies scary again. All of a sudden, they weren't these slow-moving, funny things that you could laugh at. They were fucking scary. And 28 Days Later was like a film. It wasn't just somebody threw together some money and made some bullshit.
It had high production value.
It had high production value, and it was considered. And it was just a more interesting way to do a horror movie. So this is kind of where we started to see horror get taken seriously as a genre again, immediately following kind of I call it the scheduled burning, the clearing, right, of the 90s, where we were like, it's just ridiculous, let's laugh at it. And everything in life is a pendulum swing. So we had the pendulum swing towards, haha, horror's funny, and then we had it swing back to, no, this can be a serious genre, though, that we actually take care for and treat as a work of art. And I think that media came out after that started to kind of reflect that. There was still also the self-referential comedy things. We kind of had, like, the same way in the 80s, we had just, like, way too many slasher movies come out. After 28 Days Later, we had way too many zombie movies come out.
The remake of The Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, we just had zombies everywhere. Everything was zombies. 2009, Zombie Land came out. That was like, now we're laughing at the zombies because there's been so many zombies. From 2002 to 2009, we're on zombie overload, so all that's left to do is make fun of the zombie movies, and that's what Zombieland did. And then in 2010, we had another one of my favorite horror movies, which is Cabin in the Woods. Similarly to Scream, this was very heavily self-referential. It allowed us to laugh at the commonly used tropes in horror, and it took those ideas and turned them on its head, basically. I don't know if you've seen Cabin in the Woods.
I think we saw it together.
Did we?
If I'm being perfectly honest. So
yeah, the premise of Cabin in the Woods, again, we're ruining every movie for you guys, is that it's set up like a traditional horror movie. It's set up almost like The Evil Dead, right? Which is a cult classic horror movie about a group of young people who go out to spend a weekend in a cabin in the woods, and then it turns out, the woods are evil, and they release a demon into it by reading this text that they weren't supposed to. No, they don't even read it. They play an audio sample of, like, a record or something of another man reading this secret, text that ends up summoning the demons to come, and then everybody dies except for our main hero. It goes on, and we have Evil Dead 2, which is not quite a sequel, but basically a remake of that same one with more production value. Yeah. And then we have, the second or third movie in the franchise, depending on how you want to think of it, Shop Smart, Shop S-Smart.
Oh, that one I haven't seen.
It's not called Shop Smart. It's not called Shop Smart, Shop S-Smart. That's like a catchphrase that's in it. Basically, the hero from The Evil Dead goes on and gets this, like, very normal, boring job. It's like a very funny kind of setup where he's working in a supermarket, and then he gets sucked back in time. And it's like this medieval horror movie. Now he has to fight the demons again, but in a medieval era. And it is called Army of Darkness, which is very famous. Okay, yeah. So this is kind of the setup of that franchise. So Cabin in the Woods kind of starts off like an Evil Dead movie. You've got a bunch of these young people who are carefree, and they're going to spend the weekend in a cabin in the woods, which is a common horror trope where a lot of things are set up this way. But once they get out there, you learn that the movie is not at all the type of movie you think it is. There's actually this whole secret kind of conspiracy of people who have to make these periodic horror trope sacrifices in order to keep the world functioning, because they're actually sacrifices that need to be made in this specific way to honor this demon, so that the demons or something don't eat the earth.
This sounds like the plot of Lost, which I famously hate. I'm wondering.
No, it's a great movie. It's a very funny movie, and it really is another one of those movies that's like for fans of the genre. You get all the references that are getting thrown out, and this is another way that horror builds on itself in this very self-referential way, but also it's like a dialogue that's happening between you as the viewer and the people making the movies. To understand Cabin in the Woods, you need to have seen all of
like
these
Friday
other...
the 13th and shit like that.
Right, you need to be familiar with all of these horror tropes that came before it so that you can jump into this movie and know what's going on.
I'm curious to know where, like, on the one hand, like, there are two things that seem sort of concomitant, which is, like, the Blair Witch Project kind of shit. Like, the, like, mockumentary, like, shaky cam movie. And then the M. Night Shyamalan bullshit, like, the, like...
Yeah.
Overly like the and then bullshit, like the
the big twist.
Yeah, that kind of fucking movie, which not great.
Yeah.
Where does that fit into the like either the sort of like slasher type like gore violence shit or the like witchcraft and spooky?
Well, okay, so the thing about the Blair Witch Project is it is an occult horror film, right?
Yeah.
And it's an occult horror film from what, the late 90s or early 2000s? I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I was probably in 7th grade.
98, 99.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So it was around there. And again, that was a movie that kind of revolutionized horror. Remember, Scream came in 1996, kind of cleared the path and was like, okay, reset. We're resetting horror. And from there, people were allowed to be more creative. And this is, like I said, in 2002, 28 Days Later came out. And I remember being like, oh, this is a different kind of zombie movie. The Blair Witch, similarly, you're like, oh, this is a different kind of haunted movie, ghost movie, witch movie, scary movie. By
the time, like, because I'd grown up with Poltergeist like you, and it had scared me for a while, but I'd seen it so many times, I kind of... like those kinds of things, like I was like, I kind of know how to do the jump scare now.
Yes.
Blair Witch scared the shit out of like 12-year-old me or however old I was. Like I was like, that's fucking scary as shit.
Yeah, I was also scared by the Blair Witch. So that was another one of, so that fits in kind of with what we're talking about with like 28 Days Later, when people are like, okay, we all have a laugh, we understand the state of horror. Now, knowing that, we can go forward and try to do interesting and different things with
There's
the
like
genre.
one of the things that I'm noticing is like, that is, well, 28 Days Later, I don't know, that might be its own thing, but there is, like, a formal innovation happening of, like, we have to understand, like, the sort of, like, narrative framework, like, the narrative frame and how people are coming to these, especially in, like, even the satire thing of, like, we all kind of know.
Yes, we all kind of know. And I think that's what the M. Night Shyamalan thing tried to do. They tried, like, M. Night Shyamalan movies, the reason why the big twist was such a thing is it's like, you think you know, but what if we gave you a scary movie that you didn't see coming?
Yeah.
Like, what if you didn't know? So I think this is where kind of it works into this era of like the Y2K horror movie where it's like, okay, let's try to turn this on its head now and do something interesting and fun now that we've all acknowledged that it's just the same story getting told over and over again and we're kind of sick of it. So then by the time we went through that kind of a thing, we get to the 2010s-ish, and this is where we really hit another thing that to me was born out of the slasher tradition, which is another genre that I absolutely hate of horror, which is just torture porn.
This is your Final Destinations, your...
I mean, Final Destination I wouldn't put in this category.
Or Saw.
Saw, definitely. Hostel. These franchises...
What's the Purge?
The Purge is different. The Purge is weird. So I did not include The Purge in this because specifically it is too weird to figure out The Purge's politics, because The Purge, every movie seems to have different politics. So the original setup of The Purge was almost like class warfare, where they're like, yeah, they tell you that it's so, one day a year you can all just go batshit and do whatever you want with no consequences, so the rest of the year you'll be docile and safe. But then it turns out that it's like a conspiracy by the government and some big corporations to like sell you insurance and guns.
I'm just saying, the Purge creators, the true classic swing voter.
Yeah, really it is. But then every movie has like, so people, there have been so many essays written by fans of the genre who are like, what the fuck are the politics of The Purge? What the fuck are the politics of The Purge?
I don't.
I think it's like the politics of South Park.
Yeah.
It's just like some libertarians who are like, big business bad, but haha, murder's cool sometimes.
Also, we're just kind of like edgelord shitheads. Like that's like it's edgelord shithead.
It's libertarian edgelord stuff.
I'm just gonna say edgelording. It's like I don't know how to use that as a verb.
Yeah.
It is the worst form of winking. It's like someone who is like trying to like wink at you across a bar but doesn't know how to wink, and they just do it.
Yeah, it's like it's somebody who thinks they're smart but they're not. That's why.
And it's like if you're gonna wink at me, be subtle about it.
Yeah. Well, so the torture porn thing was different than that. The torture porn thing was more like, okay, in the spirit of 28 Days Later, in the spirit of Scream, in the spirit of all these people taking these genres and trying to do something smarter and funnier with them. What can we do that's different? And what they came up with was take the slasher movie, but make it shittier and harder to watch.
Human Centipede.
Yeah, basically, but that's even campier. That's like funnier. That's like Tusk is kind of like that, where that's like, this is just kind of silly and it's got shock value. But the torture porn thing was like, let's make a movie that's actively difficult to watch. It's so gnarly.
Like, it's so... Yeah, I will admit, I have not seen any of the Saw movies because I just, like, I saw, like, when they were advertising it, when it was in theaters, and I was like, oh, that is, that looks painful.
Yeah. And it is hard. It's hard to watch. I mean, now people affectionately look back at the Saw movies as, like, a part of their teenage years, people who are adults. It's become, like, a part of, like, our cultural zeitgeist in a way where people are like, oh, haha, the Saw movies. But at the time when it came out, it was really, like, it was this shock value of, like, how fucked up can we make a movie? And it did feel kind of actually edgelord at the time.
No, I was just like, I don't, like, in the same way that, like, I find the work of, like, Peter Sotos or someone to be like the like White House type shitheads. Like, I'm like, I kind of, okay, you're gonna write aggressive noise music that has some like oblique reference to like white power and child molestation.
This is kind of
I don't
the same.
actually need to like I get it. Like, I can read about that and like an old issue of Art Forum and I'll get the point.
Right, and the thing about the Saw movies was that it was also, like, a strong element of psychological terror. It was like, what would you do in this situation? Would you cut off your own arm to save your life? Would you dig in this guy's intestines to get a key out? So it's like these things that you're like, oh shit, what would I do in this situation? So it was very, like, engaging for the audience, but this comes out of that same, like, we're going to rebirth horror right into the 2000s and try to come up with these ideas that are fresh rather than just stamping out the same shitty version of a movie over and over and over again.
I'm curious to know if you think that the like predominance of TV and especially cable TV, where you could do more like crazier shit, and like the rise of the police procedural, which got increasingly like, if you've seen an episode of like SVU, where it's just like, how much gore can we do and how like cavalier can we be about the gore?
I feel like SVU though, those shows, they didn't show any gore. It was more like they would explain these horrific things
especially
constantly.
Or like the like NCIS or like whatever the ones where they're like,
I always think about this. I'm rewatching Criminal Minds right now. And the thing about Criminal Minds is you're like, it's blatant propaganda, obviously. All these shows are blatant propaganda. They're like, oh no, everybody's about to murder you all the time. You need the police to protect you. But when you watch Criminal Minds, you're like, in order for them to have this volume of workload, there would have to be like 20 active serial killers in every single state at any time.
No, I mean, it would be like 1 out of
life.
10 people would be a serial killer.
Yeah, like, it's just like, what?
So
you have to suspend disbelief to even engage with the procedural shows that, like, in a major way. But to me, they don't have a lot of gore. It's more just psychological. It's kind of in the spirit of Saw, where it's like, what can we describe that's so fucked up?
Bones is what I'm thinking of.
Bones
where they do
gore,
like the beginning scene, you can tell that the special effects department or the props department had like a lot of fun with like Jello.
Yes, that totally makes sense.
Like, and it's like, this seems like concurrent. So like television stuff is sort of like like being able to do more weird shit, which means that like there is this like kind of cyclical relationship between film or movies, and movies
have to keep upping the ante, and upping the ante doesn't necessarily mean doing more fucked up shit. It could mean being smarter about it. Or like Cabin in the Woods, being like, you think you know what kind of movie you're watching? Haha, you don't. Or M. Night Shyamalan's kind of the same way, but it manifests differently. You think you know what kind of movie you're watching, but you don't.
You're watching a worse one than you thought you were watching.
Well, M. Night Shyamalan, except for The Sixth Sense, I do think was good.
I don't know.
I think that I rewatched The Sixth Sense a couple years ago, and I was like, you know what? This stands up. I like this movie.
I think I saw it was one of those movies that's like not the Glass one, but it's like the weird comic booky narrative.
Oh, Unbreakable. I love Unbreakable, actually.
I hate that shit so much.
I love Unbreakable. See, we really do have opposite taste in everything. Yeah, so this is kind of like the trajectory that horror movies took throughout the eras, and kind of how we see different manifestations of horror happen at different times depending on when you look at it. And the thing that we take from this, from understanding horror with its own like history, right, and development as a genre, is that horror tells us as a society what we are what we are supposed to fear. And there are different things we're told to fear in every era, right? In the 1950s and 60s, they're like, you need to fear being invaded, or you need to fear nuclear weapons. You know, in the 1980s, it's you need to fear satanic serial killers coming to stab you to death. You know, so it's like what we need to fear changes depending on the era, right? And then it's this idea always that there's going to be a few ways this can be broken down. You're either going to fear the unknown, you're going to fear the other gaining power, or you're going to fear being held accountable.
I mean, I think, right, like, the thing the sort of formal thing is that the stuff I like, at least, or, like, the stuff that, like, I'm like, oh, Halloween, it's always the, like, unknown within the known, right? Like, it's always what is, like, suppressed, what is, like, right underneath the surface of the thing that seems most comforting to you. That seems like the thing that you fear, which, like, is political in the sense that it is, like, what is suppressed is, like, the fucking female gaze, or agency, or, like, the other that is, like, accidentally also already you, right? Like, the fucking James Baldwin thing about, like, I'm an American, I'm not some fucking, like, foreign thing in your fucking world. Right, where it's like, oh, from, like, a dominant hegemonic perspective, the thing that is suppressed is also, like, the thing that is so horrifying, which is why witches become such a thing right at the moment that, like, you know, feminism becomes sort of, at least, dominant. In discourses, like, oh, like, these, like, scary-ass abject women who are ugly.
Are ugly. That's what it always comes down to,
Like, they're gonna fuck us up.
Well, I always think, all right, most horror movies, if you look at what they're telling you should fear, I do think it can be broken down to one of those three categories, personally. I think it's the unknown, the other gaining power, or being held accountable. And in The Nature of Horror, Noel Carroll says, the characters of works of horror exemplify for us the way in which to react to the monsters in the fiction. Our emotions are supposed to mirror those of the positive human character. So you have a positive human character, and they are interacting with something that is scary, and how they react is how we are taught to react to that thing and what it represents as well. So basically, when we watch horror, we are being taught what we are supposed to fear. And this is actually backed up with data. Remember how I was like, actually there is some evidence that watching movies will impact how you perceive, like, fear and safety in the world? So there was this research conducted at the Institute of Psychology in Moscow that showed that movies can significantly impact, at least we know, your racial and gender stereotypes. So the study concluded that if there was emotional involvement while viewing, the potency of the film's influence will actually increase. So when you're watching a horror movie, you have like an adrenaline rush, you're feeling terror, and because of that, horror films actually have the potential to trigger stronger emotional responses from their viewers, and that makes it easier to push forward ideas of what they're supposed to find normal and what they're supposed to find frightening. So really, horror movies are pretty successful at conditioning us to fear certain things or feel unsafe with certain things, even once the movie is over and we go out into our normal life.
And this is because I'm curious about specifically, like, the meta era. Because it is a genre that is specifically, like, you know, your Screams or your Evil Deads or whatever, where it's not, like, there are no jump scares. You're not getting the adrenaline rush thing. Because it's, like...
Well, in those movies, though, actually, I do have an emotional response to them, but my emotional response is usually giddy delight. Like, the movies usually, especially in, like, The Evil Dead or... Army of Darkness or Dead Alive. Like, these movies hit a fever pitch of ridiculousness that is so silly, it's overwhelming, and for me, it just elicits, like, a humorous glee. Like, I get literally giddy when these movies hit their apex, and it is very emotional for me, But again, I'm not being taught to fear anything. It's absurd. It's peak absurdity that I find delightful and funny.
No, I mean, I feel... It's not that. Like, when I, like, the, like, good Giallo, like, before Argento spoiled his credibility kind of thing. Like, just, like, because those movies are just visually not normal.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the blood is, like, magenta. Like, it is, like, completely engrossing in a way that, like, a fucking David Lynch movie is engrossing. Where
it's more artistic.
But it's also something that is, like, visually overwhelming in a way that is, like, I can't think anymore. I'm just fucking... So it is, like... There is, like, an affective glitchiness that happens where I'm just like, oh, I can't think straight.
Right. And so I think that, though, it does make us susceptible to interpreting the messaging from the things that we're watching. Mm-hmm. And I think this is specifically why horror ends up being a mirror for political panics and, like, political issues of our era. There's also this idea about, like, purity in horror. So Mary Douglas writes in Purity and Danger that one of the key factors of horror being frightening is that something is impure. And the very nature of what is pure is culturally designated, socially designated. So whatever society feels is impure is often represented in horror as the thing to fear.
Yeah.
So this depends totally on, like what did people think was impure in the 1960s? Interracial marriage. Yeah. What did people think was impure, you know, in pretty much every era, a young woman enjoying sex?
No, I mean, this is, right, like, the sort of purity discourse is very, you know, I keep thinking about, like, the Lucio Fulci zombie movie or whatever, or the, like, Mario Bava zombie movies, in which it's, like, inherently tied to, like, they went to the Caribbean, and there were, like, black people. And now they're experiencing zombies. Where it's like a very like specifically racialized other.
Yeah, and this is something that we still have an issue with in horror movies all the time. I just watched a terrible horror movie that I don't even remember the name of a few days ago, which was like, this white couple goes on vacation to the Caribbean and oh no, they do a custom wrong and then they're cursed by a voodoo woman and they come back to their house in the United States, but they've got a voodoo curse. Uh-oh, everything's going wrong for them. And you're just like, this is really fucking racist. Like,
no, I will say, like, and I think when we talk about like domesticity in horror or whatever, I'm going to actually talk about an X-Files episode.
Oh.
Because I think it counts.
Okay.
But like, I do think that like every like Law and Order season has like a Haitian episode where they do voodoo,
true.
And it's just always a
weird racist thing. It's so true. So here's kind of where we're almost at 2 hours for this episode, but we haven't even gotten into the meat of the episode.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, so I'm thinking this is going to be a two-parter, even though I thought it wasn't going to be. And what we're going to end up talking about next week is we're going to talk about specific political representations of horror. So we're going to talk about feminism in horror. We're going to talk about race in horror. We're going to talk about class in horror. We're going to talk about disability in horror. We're going to talk about trans identity in horror. We're going to talk about horror at home. And then, you know, this is going to be the real meat. So basically what we did is we set up for you all of the kind of context you need to go into really understanding the specific political realities that are tied to these horror movies. Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up this intro to our, I guess, our two-parter?
Everyone should read Jane Austen? On our horror, no, yeah, the fucking Northanger Abbey is good.
Peter Jackson. Wait,
have you seen Meet the Feebles? Is like weird puppet. That movie.
Meet the Feebles. It's a classic. Did you just recently watch Meet the Feebles?
No, I watched it when I was a kid.
I did too, yeah.
And I think my parents were like, "It's a puppet movie. It's fine."
It was really weird. So, okay, wait, I'm going to give you guys just a little to whet your appetite, some movies we are going to talk about. I have a whole genre of movie called My Sex Robot Hates Me that we're going to talk about, which includes Ex Machina, Wife-Like. We're going to talk about I Spit on Your Grave, Last House on the Left. We're going to talk about A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Jennifer's Body. We're going to talk about Death Proof. We're going to talk about The Substance, obviously very topical. Stepford Wives, Dracula. We're going to talk about The Final Girl as a concept, not a specific movie. We're also going to talk about Night of the Living Dead, Blackula, I might talk about Leprechaun Lep in the Hood, one of the weirdest movies of all time. We're going to talk about Honky Holocaust.
Did you grow up with the belief, which I don't think is real, but that I was told very often, that Leprechaun 4 Lep in the Hood was filmed in Fresno?
No!
Someone told me that when I was a kid, and
no.
I've repeated that to like dozens of people as though if it were true, and I will continue to I will be doing misinformation.
David's actively spreading misinformation about Leprechaun Lep in the Hood. Okay, no, but that is funny. We are also going to talk about The Craft. We're going to talk about Jordan Peele horror films like Get Out. We're going to talk about The People Under the Stairs, Wes Craven, The Shining, They Live, Us, Jaws, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Menu, the movie Freaks.
Oh, are we talking about? We're talking about Hauzu.
We're talking about Hauzu. We're talking about an M. Night Shyamalan movie, Split. We're talking about Orphan, which I clocked in the theaters would become a cult classic. We're talking about Psycho, Silence of the Lambs, Sleepaway Camp, Dressed to Kill, Parasite. We're talking about them all. And I hoped it would be this week, but it's going to be next week.
I mean, Parasite is already that's one of the few
so
like
good.
Oscar-y type movies that I'm like,
it's a great movie, yeah. So come back, join us next week for part 2. I guess we'll keep the Halloween vibes going all throughout October.
We're going to be one of those podcasts that keeps their Halloween decorations up until Christmas.
That's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it all for you. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. If you would like to join us on Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. For $3 a month, you can get 2 bonus episodes coming at you for $1.50 each. It's a pretty good deal, but if that's not something you're willing to do right now, we're just happy that you're here on the main episodes with us.